Imagine for a moment that you're 9 years old, sitting on a golden throne in a palace that stretches as far as the eye can see. The halls are alive with the sound of harp music, and every surface gleams with lapis lazuli and gold. Yet inside your young heart is a knot of fear, because you've been told that if you fail to please the gods, the very ground beneath Egypt will crack open and swallow your people. This was Tutankhamun's world, a boy thrust into impossible responsibility, haunted by illness and haunted by superstition, who died before he could truly grow up. Hello there, and welcome to Boring History, the place where we explore the strange truths of the past in a calm, sleep-friendly voice. Tonight, get ready to drift away as we step into the shadowy world of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, those living gods whose lives were as dazzling as they were disturbing. Before we begin, I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it where you are right now? Feel free to drop a comment and say hello. If you enjoy this kind of relaxing educational journey, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. All right, let's set the scene. Picture a land of shimmering deserts and lush river valleys where massive stone temples rise against a breathtaking blue sky. For over 3,000 years, a civilization flourished along the Nile, ruled by pharaohs who claimed divine status. They were worshipped as incarnations of Horus on earth, wielding absolute power over life and death. But behind the splendor and ceremony lay obsessions that can make our modern minds reel. Incestuous marriages meant to purify royal blood, ritual sacrifices to accompany pharaohs into the afterlife, and a devotion to death rituals so extreme that they built giant tombs meant to confound tomb robbers for eternity. Let's zoom out first and look at the big picture. Ancient Egypt spanned from around 3100 BCE, when King Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt, all the way to 30 BCE, when Cleopatra's reign ended and Rome claimed the land. Over those millennia, pharaohs oversaw breakthroughs like the ox-drawn plow, the first 365-day calendar, and a writing system of intricate hieroglyphs. Their greatest legacy, however, was physical: the pyramids, the rock-hewn temples, and subterranean tombs that whisper of their obsession with death and eternity. But this show isn't about bullet points or dry facts. It's about the human stories behind those monuments, stories of ambition, fear, delusion, and devotion. Tonight, in part 1 of our 10-part series, we'll explore the origin of the pharaoh's divine status, their daily rituals at the height of the New Kingdom, and the chilling practice of retainer sacrifice in the early dynasties. Next time, we'll dive into palace intrigue, sibling rivalries, and the startling case of Pharaoh Akhenaten. So let's step back to around 1500 BCE, when the New Kingdom was in full swing. At dawn, sunlight would play across the pale limestone walls of the royal palace in Thebes. Imagine the pharaoh, maybe Thutmose III, emerging from his bedchamber as barefoot servants scramble to dress him in finery. His head and body are shaved silky smooth, his eyes lined with kohl and malachite, and his limbs anointed with fragrant oils. A crown of gold shaped like a falcon's wings settles on his brow to signify his kinship with Horus. This wasn't mere vanity. Every piece of jewelry, every drop of oil, every stroke of makeup carried magical significance meant to ward off evil and reinforce his divinity. As he stepped into a courtyard lush with date palms and lotus blossoms, tamed baboons chattered in the shade, and lion cubs yawned lazily at his feet. The pharaoh's day would begin with solemn offerings at the palace shrine, libations of milk and wine to Ra Osiris and the pharaoh's own deified ancestors. Priests chanted hymns, incense curled upward, and the air felt thick with reverence. Next came the council meeting. Seated on a gilded throne, the pharaoh listened while his vizier read out petitions, border disputes, to settle grain shipments, to oversee a new temple project to approve. Though advisors offered counsel, the final word always rested with the pharaoh. Then, under a blazing sun, he'd process through the city in a magnificent chariot, subjects lining the streets cheering as he tossed handfuls of grain and gold. But even during these triumphant moments, the pharaoh was shadowed by superstition. He always entered a room right foot first to avoid evil spirits. He ate with his left hand, only saving his right for ritual touch with statues of the gods. He never let his shadow fall on a priest or temple statue, believing it could unleash divine wrath. Every action was governed by Ma'at, the cosmic order, and a single misstep could, in theory, bring chaos not just upon him, but the entire kingdom. As evening approached, there would be entertainment, dancing girls, harpists, acrobats. The pharaoh sipped sweet date wine from a golden chalice, discussing theology with his inner circle. Yet even amid laughter and music, death hovered always at the edge of his thoughts. He knew this earthly life was but a prelude to the field of reeds, the eternal paradise that awaited him. If only he could secure the proper tomb, magical spells, and burial goods to get there. Which brings us to one of the most chilling practices of early Egypt: retainer sacrifice. In the first dynasty, kings like Pharaoh and his successor King Jer were buried surrounded by rows of sacrificed servants meant to accompany them in death. At Abydos, archaeologists found over 300 bodies laid out like a grim honor guard. Some wore cosmetic face paint jewels and woven linen, evidence that these were chosen attendants, not random captives. They were killed, strangled, or bludgeoned so their souls could continue serving their master. To us, it's horrifying. To the pharaohs, it was the ultimate demonstration of power, commanding obedience even beyond the grave. Thankfully, by the end of the Old Kingdom, human sacrifice faded away, replaced by Shabti figurines, small statuettes inscribed with spells to magically perform tasks in the afterlife. But the shadow of those early sacrifices lingered, a reminder of the vast gulf between the divine rulers and the common people. Even in death, a pharaoh's comfort outweighed any human life. Tonight's Part 1 journey ends here, but in our next episode, we'll unravel the tangled web of the royal household sibling marriages designed to keep the blood pure, rival queens scheming for their son's succession, and the astonishing reign of Hatshepsut, the woman who became king in all but name. You won't want to miss it. So dim, the lights let the Nile's gentle waters and the whisper of papyrus sails lull you closer to sleep. And join me next time as we continue our stroll through the captivating, unsettling world of Egypt's god kings. Sweet dreams. And may the sands of time carry you softly into your rest. Let's glide now into the echoing halls of the pharaoh's palace, where whispers of ambition and betrayal float like incense smoke among columns of polished granite. Behind the daily splendor, the harpists, the tortured red ochre shadows, the scent of lotus-filled pools ran a current of intrigue powerful enough to topple a throne. At the heart of it all was the pharaoh's family, a claustrophobic web of wives, concubines, children, and half-siblings bound together by blood, yet riven by rivalry. Marriages within the royal house were no mere romantic affairs. They were calculated moves on a cosmic chessboard. By wedding sisters, daughters, even mothers, pharaohs kept the divine blood untainted. To us, it sounds monstrous, but for them, incest was ritual cleanliness, a way to mirror the gods themselves. Osiris and Isis, siblings and spouses in divine union. Imagine the corridor outside the pharaoh's inner sanctum. On one side stands the great royal wife, the chief queen, draped in her finest linens and crowned with the white lotus and red crown etched into gold. She holds the promise of heirs and thus of the throne itself. On the other side drifts a legion of lesser wives and concubines chosen from nobility abroad. Hittite princesses Nubian nobles brought for alliance and diplomacy. Each one knows her value. A son born to a favored concubine could leapfrog the queen's older daughter in the line of succession. Take Nefertari, the beloved queen of Ramses II. Her tomb in the Valley of the Queens brims with paintings of eternal banquet feasts, and her luminous portrait in inlaid stone. Yet her security was never absolute. Court gossip tells of a secondary wife named Isetnefret, her own rival, scheming to elevate her son Merneptah over Nefertari's children. Graffiti appeared in the royal corridors, defamatory verses mocking jabs at Nefertari's lineage, until the pharaoh himself had to intervene, issuing stern decrees and sending spies crisscrossing the palace to root out the instigators. Sibling rivalry could be even more lethal. Pharaoh Amenhotep III once ordered bladed guard dogs stationed at every entrance to the royal nurseries after learning that his own younger brother had plotted to smother the heir apparent in a linen sack. In the flicker of torchlight, betrayal sat at every banquet table, and every embrace carried the risk of poison. Trusted viziers were as fearful of assassination plots as they were of the gods' fickle favor. And yet amid this lethal soap opera, moments of tenderness flickered through the corridors like shafted sunlight. Ramses II's daughter, Princess Meritamen, was said to be her father's confidant, honed in statecraft, present in council, her voice uncommonly bold. Papyrus letters show him entrusting her with messages to foreign courts, praising her judgment and grace. Pharaohs occasionally doted on their offspring. Akhenaten's famous reliefs depict him and Queen Nefertiti playing with daughters in the courts of Akhetaten, tender scenes that contrast starkly with the era's more brutal rituals. No story of dynastic intrigue can omit Hatshepsut, perhaps the most astonishing figure in Egypt's royal saga. Born into the 18th dynasty as daughter, sister-wife, and mother of pharaohs, Hatshepsut became regent for her stepson Thutmose III when he ascended the throne as a child, but she proved far too capable to remain mere caretaker. She donned the false beard and masculine attire of a king, issued decrees under her own cartouche, and commissioned obelisks and temples that rivaled those of her male predecessors. The temple at Deir el-Bahri, Hatshepsut's mortuary complex, is a testament to her political genius and aesthetic vision. Terraces carved into the cliff face, lined with statues portraying her in regal kilt and divine headdress. There, in quiet sanctuaries, she placed offerings to Amun-Ra and set her image alongside lion-headed deities. Yet, after her death, Thutmose III ordered her statues smashed, her name chiseled off monuments in erasure remarkable even by Egyptian standards. Some scholars believe he feared her popularity would eclipse his own legacy. Others suspect he saw her reign as an illegitimate disruption of cosmic order. Let's pause a moment and imagine the Grand Opet Festival in Thebes. A massive barge carries the triad statues of Amun-Mut and Khonsu down the Nile, accompanied by priests chanting ancient hymns. Behind them, the pharaoh, resplendent in ceremonial garb, rides upon the deck, parading his divine union with the gods. Yet nearby, in shaded alcoves, rival factions of palace women debate how best to curry favor with the king, plotting a banquet to showcase their daughters' talents, whispering promises of gold and land in exchange for influence. In that swirl of sacred spectacle and palace scandal, the line between the divine and the human blurred entirely. Nowhere was the clash between sacred duty and personal ambition more stark than in the twilight of the New Kingdom, as power fragmented among high priests, military generals, and foreign mercenaries. The widening gap between the throne's glory and its realpolitik bred increasingly desperate power plays. In one notorious coup, Pharaoh Ramses III faced assassins within his own harem wives and servants hired for intrigue wielding daggers beneath the flicker of torchlight. Court records, preserved on the judicial papyrus, recount how conspirators planned to install a new king from a side branch of the royal line. Though foiled, the aftermath was horrific trials executions and the forced suicides of dozens of palace retainers. And yet, while conspiracies unfolded in shadow, the pharaoh's image in public remained unblemished. In art, he always appears serene shoulders, squared face, calm, the eternal regent of Maat. Temples and tombs celebrated him as a demigod, the potentate who conquered chaos, ensured the Nile floods, and delivered justice. Peace offerings depicted him stroking lion cubs, symbolizing his harmony with nature, while hieroglyphs praised his wisdom in speaking truth like the rising sun. This duality, cosmic stabilizer in the public eye, mortal schemes in private chambers, lay at the heart of pharaonic power. A pharaoh needed to project divinity so convincingly that even the elites doubted rumors of mortal flaws. Coins and monuments proclaimed his victories, while palace scribes carefully erased records of embarrassing failures. His success depended on the illusion of infallibility. So how did these god kings maintain that balance through ritual repetition and elaborate propaganda? Twice each day, the pharaoh would parade before his golden effigy in temple sanctuaries, offering libations and reciting liturgies that echoed through sound channels carved beneath stone floors. Priests in white linen would polish his statues until the metal glowed, anoint them with oils, and refresh their garments, acts that bound the living king's power to those of his divine prototypes. Even building projects fed this myth-making machine. When Ramses II carved the colossal statues at Abu Simbel, 20-meter stone behemoths flanking the temple entrance, he wasn't merely marking territory. He was casting himself as a timeless deity, his visage immortalized in geology itself. That image, gazing across the sands, spoke louder than any whispered court intrigue. By resting on both public ceremony and private coercion, the pharaohs held tight to their dual roles. Yet over centuries, as foreign powers encroached, the Libyans, the Nubians, the Assyrians, and later Alexander the Great, those internal cracks widened. Dynastic feuds intensified, foreign wives entered the harem, and the notion of an unbroken divine bloodline frayed at the edges. But through it all, the core remained the pharaoh's family, as microcosm of Egypt's fate, where every son born, every daughter married, reshaped the destiny of an empire. As the moonlight filters through the temple colonnades and the Nile's gentle lap echoes in your mind, remember this: for all their cosmic aspirations, the pharaohs were people driven by love, fear, ambition, and sorrow. They built temples to the gods, yet schemed in chambers dripping with candle wax. They sought immortality, yet died in intrigue. In the next part of our journey, we'll follow the pharaoh's fixation on the afterlife itself, shabby figurines, hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and the transition from human sacrifice to symbolic magic. Until next time, rest easy, and let these tales of power and passion guide you into your dreams. Close your eyes and picture this: the torchlight dances on ancient stone, revealing frescoes of golden boats gliding across an obsidian sea. Beneath your feet, the rock is carved into twisting corridors that descend into unbroken silence. Somewhere ahead waits a hidden chamber sealed for millennia, containing the final resting place of a god made flesh. One who believed his journey to the stars must be secured by spells and sacrifices beyond imagination. Welcome back. Tonight, we slip into the heart of the Pharaoh's obsession, death, and the promise of forever. For these living gods, the greatest challenge wasn't ruling Egypt, it was cheating death. From gory early-day retainer sacrifices to the delicate spell-inscribed figurines, later called shabti, each innovation in burial practice reveals a civilization grappling with its own mortality. The early dynastic horror. Let's rewind to around 3000 BCE in Abydos, where the first pharaohs of the first dynasty were interred. Archaeologists have unearthed subsidiary graves, rows upon rows of sacrificed attendants, servants, and guards buried alongside their king. Imagine dozens of bodies dressed in fine linen, some with jewelry and cosmetic pigments still vivid after 3,000 years. These were not anonymous victims. They were named individuals chosen to follow their master into the next world. Their sacrifice proclaimed the pharaoh's authority. Even in death, I command your loyalty. Yet, as sanctified as such acts seemed, they exacted a terrible human cost. Entire households disappeared to populate the underworld retinue. Over time, the spectacle provoked unease honor for the pharaoh, terror for the living. By the end of the Old Kingdom, around 2100 BCE, human sacrifice largely faded away. But the desire to surround a god-king with devoted servants remained unbroken, merely shifting form. From flesh to clay, the rise of shabti. Enter the shabti, those petite articulated figurines that pop up in tombs like silent sentinels. Typically carved from wood faience or stone, each shabti bore a magical inscription from the Book of the Dead commanding, "When you, O king, require labor in the afterlife, let this shabti answer for you." Thousands of shabti could fill a burial chamber, each one a stand-in for a real person. Imagine the scene. Instead of sacrificing living servants, priests and artisans meticulously sculpt hundreds of shabti, paint them in bright hues, and inscribe them with spells. In the tomb of Seti, 13th century BCE, archaeologists found over 700 of these little figures, each ready to farm weave and build in the field of reeds. It was efficiency through enchantment and a mark of compassion in a way sparing living souls from death, carving the road to eternity. By the New Kingdom, circa 1550-1070, BCE pyramid building fell out of favor, too conspicuous, too tempting for grave robbers. Pharaohs retreated to the Valley of the Kings, a warren of narrow shafts hewn into limestone hills west of Thebes. Here, tombs were hidden beneath desert sands, their entrances concealed by rubble and brick. Yet concealment alone could not guarantee safety. The tomb of Amenhotep II, rediscovered in 1898, had been looted so thoroughly that little remained but empty sarcophagus chambers and fragments of pottery. King Tutankhamun's tomb, however, lay forgotten until 1922, a nearly intact time capsule. When Howard Carter first glimpsed that gilded innermost sanctuary, he famously whispered, "Can you see anything?" The answer was a glittering panorama. Golden chariots, jewel-encrusted jewelry, alabaster beds, even a model boat for Tut's voyage across the sky. That discovery reshaped how we view royal afterlives. It showed us that pharaohs demanded not only food and clothes, but entertainment and comfort, on par with any living monarch games, furniture, even stone scarabs carved to symbolize rebirth. Each object bore inscriptions ensuring the king's safe passage and eternal renewal. Magic as insurance. But physical goods could be stolen or destroyed. True security lay in magic. Wall paintings in KV-17, Seti I's tomb, depict scenes from the Amduat, the mysterious underworld map. Inky blue ceilings represent the night sky sprinkled with gold stars. Doorways inscribed with hieroglyphs open into cascading chambers, each a symbolic trap for malevolent spirits. Priests performing the burial ceremony chanted spells punctuating the air with recitations meant to animate Shabti guard the mummy and escort the king through the 12 hours of darkness. Amulets, scarabs, ankhs, wedjat eyes were placed within linen wrappings, each a talisman of vitality, protection, or resurrection. On the inside of the outer coffin of Thutmose III, a gold scarab lay over the heart to ensure that his Bay personality could reunite with his K vital spark. These weren't mere superstitions, they were the central insurance policy of pharaonic power. Every ritual, every carved symbol, reinforced the pharaoh's right to endure beyond the grave. Failure in their belief risked cosmic imbalance, no Nile flood, no harvest, no Egypt, the last flickers of human sacrifice. Although human sacrifice declined, vestiges appeared even later. In the Middle Kingdom, texts refer to followers sacrificed to accompany high officials to the next world, implying that symbolic or minimal rites endured in remote regions. But by the Ramesside period, the state religion condemned such practices, favoring symbolic substitution completely. We see hints in papyri lamenting outdated customs. Let no man slay his brother, for the tomb one admonishes. Lessons in impermanence. And yet for all this obsessive preparation, the pharaoh's eternal resting places often proved fragile. Tomb robbers struck repeatedly, temples decayed, and centuries of sandstorms eroded inscriptions. It's a bitter irony from human sacrifice to Shabdi magic. Every burial innovation sought permanence, yet tombs crumbled or were looted, and the living world marched on. Today, modern science sheds new light. CT scans of mummies reveal details of disease, diet, and even cause of death: Tutankhamun's fractured leg, Ramses III's throat wound. DNA testing uncovers familial links. Tut's parents were siblings, confirming the dangers of royal incest. Isotope analysis traces trade routes, showing that cedar wood in coffins came from Lebanon, and that gold for funerary masks flowed from Nubia. In a sense, the pharaohs achieved a different kind of immortality, not in the field of reeds, but in our curiosity. Their tombs whisper secrets through dust and death masks, lessons in ambition, devotion, and the human reckoning with mortality. So, Aotis, as you drift toward sleep, imagine those hidden corridors and silent statue spells etched in stone and miniature Shabti kneading clay bricks by moonlight. Remember that for every golden mask, there was once a beating heart, and for every magic spell, human hands that carved it, believing in a promise of eternity. Next time, we'll journey into the reign of Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who upended tradition with monotheism, moved the capital to the desert, and shattered the familiar world of gods and kings. Until then, may your dreams be guided by gentle stars, no tomb robbers allowed. Sleep well. The sun hangs low over the desert plain, its disk blazing like a promise as yet unfulfilled. Imagine a new city, Amarna, rising from the sands. Broad avenues, flanked by clapboard palaces, open-air temples carved for a single god whose name was uttered no more than Aten the sun disk. This was Akhenaten's radical vision, a pharaoh who would upend millennia of Egyptian tradition and attempt to remake his world in the image of a singular divine light. Akhenaten, born Amenhotep IV, was hardly an average ruler. Early in his reign, around 1353 BCE, He began to chafe at the sprawling priesthood of Amun-Ra and the tangled polytheism that underpinned every facet of state life. He penned hymns declaring Aten as the sole lord of the earth, creator of life, and even changed his name to mean servant of Aten. By year 5 of his reign, he had founded Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna, a purpose-built capital consecrated to the worship of the sun disk alone. Visualize the great temple of the Aten, a broad open courtyard with no roof, so the sunlight could pour directly onto the altar. Bronze statues caught the glare. Brick pylons rose like bookends to the sky. There were no dark inner sanctuaries, only open rays and the chanting of hymns at dawn and dusk. Pottery shards from Amarna bear Akkadian and Canaanite inscriptions indicating that foreign traders, diplomats, and soldiers circulated freely, drawn by curiosity or compelled by treaty. It felt like a cosmopolitan utopia until you glimpse its darker undercurrent. Akhenaten's religious revolution extended into art. The strict idealized forms of the Old Kingdom gave way to fluid, elongated figures. Limbs drifted like tendrils, bellies curved toward fertility, heads bulged in a style that scholars still debate as either a propagandistic statement or a frank depiction of the pharaoh's Marfan-like physique. In tomb chapels carved into the cliffs, Akhenaten and Queen Nefertiti appear entwined with their daughters, sunbeams radiating lovingly from the Aten's disk above. Intimate details, belly buttons, bone structure, and affectionate family scenes betrayed an emotional tone unprecedented in Egyptian art. Yet for all its idealism, the Amarna period was riddled with tensions. Traditional priests of Amun-Ra were stripped of lands and privileges. Their temples fell silent or were repurposed into Aten shrines. Local governors and nobles whose power depended on the old cults found themselves sidelined. Projects from Karnak to Luxor ground to a halt. Grain shipments rerouted as the state bureaucracy groaned under reorganization. Whispers of conspiracy curled through Amarna's shaded colonnades. "He has torn down the gods," some courtiers muttered. Is the king a madman or a visionary? Queen Nefertiti, Akhenaten's great royal wife, became his indispensable partner. In reliefs, she stands on equal footing, smiting enemies alongside her husband, bestowing the Ankh of life. Her headdress, a flat-topped blue crown, became emblematic of this new faith. She bore 6 daughters, who were often depicted in public ceremonies, reinforcing the idea of a divine family. For a brief flicker in history, it seemed the gods had indeed chosen a pharaoh who would transcend old rivalries and forge a new cosmic order. But the cosmic balance cannot be so easily subverted. By year 12, a famine swept the delta. The Nile's floodwaters were low. In the fields, farmers invoked the old gods, scapegoating the king's reforms for their plight. At Amarna, letters inscribed on clay tablets show grain shipments, delayed petitions pleading for relief. High-ranking officials beseeched the pharaoh to restore the old rights. Even his own daughters aged out of favor as political pawns. The sunlight that once symbolized divine blessing now felt like relentless scrutiny. Akhenaten's health also declined. Skeletal remains suggest arthritis and heart disease, a cruel irony for a man who styled himself as the living embodiment of eternal light. In year 17, he died at about age 45, still relatively young for a pharaoh. His burial at Amarna was hastily arranged. The tomb walls bear iconography, half-finished spells uncarved. The Aten cult, deprived of its founder, flickered before the old gods surged back. His successors, first his son-in-law Smenkhkare, then young Tutankhamun, who would become Tutankhamun, restored the traditional pantheon, moved the capital back to Thebes, and systematically demolished or defaced Akhenaten's monuments. By the end of the 19th dynasty, Akhenaten's very name was expunged from king lists. His city was abandoned and swallowed by desert winds, its stone buildings quarried for new temples. Yet his brief reign left an indelible mark, monotheism's first grand experiment, an art revolution, and a cautionary tale about how radically changing a civilization can provoke collapse. Today, modern archaeology and forensic science help us peer behind the veneer. CT scans of Akhenaten's mummy, assuming correct identification, reveal oval skulls and malformed joints, suggesting Marfan syndrome or another connective tissue disorder. DNA analysis ties him closely to Tutankhamun and the infamous royal inbreeding practices. Yet even these clinical details cannot fully explain his radical faith or the emotional intensity of Amarna art. They remind us, however, that these god kings were flesh and bone vulnerable to disease, political pressure, and the fickle currents of popular belief. As the desert night cools and you drift toward sleep, consider the paradox at the core of the Amarna revolution. A pharaoh striving to break the chains of tradition, only to be undone by the very society he sought to transform. He illuminated the world with the sun disk's light, then vanished into its rays, leaving only ruins and questions in his wake. Next time, we leave Amarna's desert and return to Thebes to meet Ramses II the Great, whose 70-year reign would eclipse virtually every predecessor in both longevity and monumentality. We'll witness colossal statues carved at Abu Simbel, the epic battle of Kadesh, and the pharaoh who bent history to his will. Until then, may your dreams be gentle as lotus petals and bright as Aten's golden rays. Imagine gliding down the Nile at dawn mists curling off the water as you approach colossal statues carved into sandstone cliffs. 4 giant seated figures stare out across the river, each over 20 meters tall, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, their calm, inscrutable faces gazing toward eternity. This is Abu Simbel Ramesses the King's crowning marvel, and it signals the arrival of a pharaoh determined to outshine every predecessor. Ramesses, often called Ramesses the Great, ruled for an astonishing 66 years c. 1279-1213 BCE. Picture him as a vigorous man in his prime, tall, broad-shouldered, with a prominent aquiline nose, a shock of dark hair escaping beneath his crown, and a regal beard that in relief carvings seems to bristle with energy. His reign marked the peak of Egypt's international power and architectural ambition. But it was also a time of personal myth-making on a grand scale. The Battle of Kadesh and the birth of propaganda. Early in his reign, Ramesses faced the Hittite Empire at Kadesh on the Orontes River in modern Syria. He brought a massive army, over 20,000 men, in 4 divisions named after Egyptian gods. The Hittites outnumbered him, and at one point, Ramesses' division was ambushed. Ancient dispatches nonetheless recount his heroic solo charge into the enemy ranks, rallying his troops from the brink of disaster. Whether he truly turned the tide alone is debated, but Egyptian reliefs immortalize the moment Ramesses' bow in hand, a pharaoh unbowed amid chaos, the sun glinting on his armor. The poem of Pentor, inscribed at Abydos centuries later, amplifies the story into epic proportions. Sound familiar? It's arguably the world's first recorded piece of state propaganda shaping public memory. So he would be remembered as a warrior king who single-handedly secured Egypt's borders. The aftermath was a stalemate, and treaty negotiations followed. But Ramesses spun it as total victory, commissioning obelisks in Heliopolis that boasted of his conquests to the river Euphrates. By reframing a drawn battle as a triumph, he set a template that rulers have followed ever since: control the narrative and you control history. Abu Simbel, a river-sized monument to self-glorification. Fast forward 2 decades. Tired of having to sail from Thebes to Nubia on small barges, Ramesses ordered a new temple directly on the Nile's west bank at Abu Simbel. The task was monumental. He carved 4 colossal statues of himself, each flanked by smaller figures of his queen Nefertari and several of his children, straight into the cliff face. Imagine the logistics: hundreds of stonemasons, engineers, laborers, and priests laboring under the desert sun. Granite blocks were quarried miles away, floated downstream on barges, then dragged onto ramps and hoisted into place. Courtiers recorded every footstep of the pharaoh's progress, ensuring no detail went unchiseled. When it was complete, the temple's sanctuary would be lit only twice a year, on February 22nd and October 22, when the rising sun penetrated its inner sanctum to illuminate statues of Ta-Amun-Ra Harmakis and Ramesses himself. The smaller temple next door honored Queen Nefertari, one of the few consorts elevated to her own rock sanctuary. In its reliefs, she stands equal in height to the pharaoh, her beauty rendered in delicate stone inlays. It was a rare tribute to a woman in a male-dominated court, reflecting both Ramesses' affection and her political influence. A vast family and endless building projects. By the time he was an elder statesman, Ramesses had fathered over 100 children with 8 principal wives and perhaps dozens of concubines. Imagine the palace corridors teeming with princes and princesses, each vying for attention and favor, each a potential pawn in dynastic politics. His eldest son, Amun-Herkhepeshef, was groomed as crown prince but predeceased him. Ultimately, it was his 13th son, Merneptah, who succeeded him at age 60. Meanwhile, Ramesses' building spree raged across Egypt. New temples at Karnak and Luxor, additions to the Ramesseum near Thebes obelisks in Heliopolis and Tanis, and rock-cut sanctuaries in remote desert oases. He restored older monuments too often, recarving his own cartouche over those of previous kings, as if to stamp his divine right on every stone in the land. Laborers ranged from paid craftsmen to corvée workers, peasants conscripted during the Nile's flood season when fields lay underwater. Archaeological excavations at Deir el-Medina, the workers' village near the Valley of the Kings, reveal their hardships: cramped quarters, high rates of arthritis from lifting heavy blocks, occasional uprisings when grain rations ran low. Yet they also received health care and benefits: fat feet of mutton on festival days, jars of wine, affording them a standard of living better than one might expect for state laborers. Diplomacy culture and the waning New Kingdom. Ramesses' ambitions extended beyond battlefield and quarry. He married daughters of Nubian and Hittite rulers when treaties demanded closer ties. Egyptian craftsmen were sent to Syria to teach local artisans, and foreign artisans arrived at his court, blending Hittite motifs into Egyptian art. His reign saw a cultural flowering: temple hymns, secular poems praising his wisdom, even love songs penned for Nefertari. Yet cracks appeared beneath the veneer. Late in his reign, drought and famine struck. Low Nile inundations around 1200 BCE caused grain shortages. Stelae record relief provisions to starving farmers. Border incursions by Libyan and Sea Peoples raiders increased. Egypt's empire, once stretching from the Euphrates to Nubia, retracted to its own delta. Inscriptions on a stela near Memphis lament, "The land is undone, no grain, no oil, no linen, no beer." No, the final chapter: mortuary cult and memory. After his death, around age 90, Ramesses was interred originally in the Valley of the King's tomb, KV7, but tomb robbers struck almost immediately. Priests of his mortuary cult stealthily moved his mummy multiple times, first to a secret cache in Deir el-Bahari, then to Sheikh Abd el-Korna, and finally to what became known as the Royal Cache at DB 320, where it lay undisturbed until 1881. When Gaston Maspero unwrapped Ramesses' linen in 1886, he found a fragmented body bones missing skull, cracked likely from ancient tomb raiders or reburial mishaps. Yet even in pieces, Ramesses' visage retained its power, a strong jaw, a hooked nose, and in life hair so red that the Greeks called him Ramesses the Red One. His memory endured not because of flawless victories, but because he mastered the art of legacy. Through temple walls, stele poems, and his mortuary cult, he sustained his presence among the living for centuries. Even when Egypt sank into subsequent collapse and foreign rule, priests kept his cult alive, and his monuments, though eroded, stood as testaments to his ambition. Reflections on power and permanence. Ramesses' life teaches us that absolute power thrives on spectacle. Grand temples, heroic myths, and public ceremonies that bind people's loyalty. He leveraged art diplomacy, military might, and religion to cast himself as both warrior and god. Yet his story also warns of hubris and overreach. Building monuments can't fill granaries, and coerced labors can spark resentment. As you let your eyes close, picture those colossal faces at Abu Simbel, once more silent sentinels, carved in floodlit rock, bearing witness to the brilliance and burdens of absolute rule. They stare across the centuries at us now, reminders that glory is fleeting, legacy is fragile, and the line between monument and mausoleum can blur in the sands of time. Next time, we'll explore the final native pharaohs, the twilight of the New Kingdom, and the days when Libyan chieftains and foreign mercenaries held sway, leading us eventually to Cleopatra's dramatic final stand. Until then, rest in peace, and may your dreams be as enduring as stone. Imagine walking through deserted temple courtyards at dusk, the pillars draped in shadows as the wind whispers through empty colonnades. You realize that not all legacies endure in golden reliefs. Some linger only in the quiet echo of crumbling stone. After Ramesses III's grand age, Egypt entered a slow fading, a murmured echo of former glory that stretched across centuries. The reign of Merneptah and seeds of decline. When Merneptah, Ramesses' 13th son, ascended the throne at age 60, he inherited an empire already under strain. Pressed by Libyan incursions in the west and Sea People's raiders along the delta, his short reign, c. 1213-1203 BCE, centered on defense rather than building. The famous Merneptah stele boasts of crushing a Libyan coalition, but the very need to raise hastily conscripted militia hinted at weakening central control. Corvée laborers grumbled in the quarries. Priests in Thebes quietly petitioned for grain rations as harvests lagged. By the time Merneptah's reign ended, the once mighty New Kingdom veered into fragmentation. Provincial governors, once loyal vassals, grew more independent, and the pharaoh's word lost its absolute edge. The third intermediate period, a patchwork of power. In the centuries that followed, 1070s, 664 BCE, Egypt splintered. The high priests of Amun at Thebes wielded king-like authority in Upper Egypt, while rival dynasties ruled in Tanis and Bubastis in the Delta. Pharaohs became marquee names on monuments, but many controlled little more than their immediate temple estates. Picture Tanis, where Pharaoh Psusenes. I built a magnificent tomb that, unlike Tutankhamun's, lay intact until modern times. Beneath its sandstone, archaeologists found a solid silver coffin, gold masks, and a trove of ceremonial jewelry. Yet above ground, the delta's marshlands encroached on ancient canals. Without the Nile's regular floods, farmland shriveled and central coffers emptied. Meanwhile, in Nubia, far to the south, a dynamic kingdom called Kush was rising. Its rulers, steeped in Egyptian customs, worshipping Amun at the great temple of Jebel Barkal, gathered strength to the point that by 760 BCE, King Pi marched north, claiming the title Pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt. He and his successors of the 25th dynasty, such as Shabaka and Taharka, restored temples at Karnak, rebuilt pyramids at Nuri, and celebrated themselves in reliefs that rivaled those of old. Yet this reunion was short-lived. Assyrian armies swept through in two devastating campaigns, c. 671 and 663 BCE, sacking Thebes, toppling Taharka's successors, and imposing puppet rulers in Memphis. Suddenly, Egypt was no longer the conqueror, but the conquered, its wealth diverted to Assyrian coffers. The late period struggling for autonomy. As Assyrian power waned, native dynasties re-emerged in Sai's 26th dynasty. Psamtik I c. 664 to 610 BCE professed to restore Egypt's At by repairing temples and reactivating trade with Greek city-states. Greek mercenaries served in his army. Foreign artisans brought new styles. Yet Egypt's sovereignty remained precarious, swayed by the great powers of Persia. In 525 BCE, Cambyses of Persia conquered Egypt, inaugurating the 27th dynasty of Persian satraps. Persian governors looted temples, raised a gold of the Medes tax, and placed Achaemenid symbols on lotus columns. The Nile's priests, guardians of Egypt's soul, found themselves forced to invoke Persian kings in hymns once reserved for pharaohs. A brief native resurgence under Amyrtius' 28th dynasty flickered in the Delta, only to be suppressed by a second Persian invasion in 343 BCE. By then, Egypt had endured 2 centuries of foreign domination, its temples worn by neglect or desecration, its pharaonic line broken. Alexander's conquest and the Ptolemaic experiment. Into this fractured realm strode Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. Enthroned as pharaoh in Memphis, he pledged to respect Egyptian religion. He made sacrifices to Amun, built at Siwa Oasis, and allowed native priests to keep their lands. For a moment, Greece and Egypt seemed to merge. Greek artisans carved statues of Alexander in pharaonic pose. Greek and Egyptian deities intermingled in temple reliefs. After Alexander's death in Babylon, 323 BCE, his general Ptolemy seized Egypt, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty. Alexandria rose on the Nile Delta, a Hellenistic marvel of libraries, learning, and commerce. Ptolemaic pharaohs adorned themselves with double crowns and spoke Egyptian, yet governed through Greek courts. Their grandest gesture, the library and museum at Alexandria, where scholars chronicled Egypt's past. The temple pyramid of Taposiris Magna combined Ptolemaic stonework with pharaonic hieroglyphs. Still, the Ptolemies' reliance on mercenary armies, internal court feuds, and a delicate balancing between two cultures sowed instability. Cleopatra 7. The final act, which brings us to Cleopatra the 7, 51 to 30 BCE, the last pharaoh. Fluent in several tongues, learned in mathematics and philosophy, she was as much a student of Rome's politics as a priestess in Isis's cult. Picture her aboard a gilded Nile barge, sails dyed royal purple, flanked by advisors in togas and priests in linen tunics. Julius Caesar and Mark Antony courted her favor. Coins minted in her name show her as both queen and deity, wearing a diadem with a ram's horns, a symbol of Amun. She blended Roman and Egyptian ritual, sacrificing bulls in the Forum at Rome one day dedicating offerings at Dendera's temple the next. Yet her world fell apart after the Battle of Actium 31 BCE. Octavian's naval victory forced her hand. In 30 BCE, Cleopatra famously took her own life, whether by an asp's bite or poison jar, remains debated, rather than become a captive in Rome. With her death, Pharaonic rule ended, and Egypt became a Roman province. Reflections on an empire's echo. As you reflect on these centuries, the priest kings of Thebes, the Kushite conquerors, the Persian satraps, the Greek usurpers, consider how resilient yet vulnerable Egypt proved. Its pharaohs built monuments to eternity, yet their dynasties rose and fell like the Nile's floodwaters. Foreigners could seize the throne, but they too adopted Egyptian rituals, hoping to harness its ancient legitimacy. Today, the scattered ruins, the temple pylons at Karnak, the blackened columns at Persepolis, the empty royal tombs hewn into the Valley of the Kings testify to a civilization that captivated conquerors and left an indelible mark on human history. Even the Romans, Christians, and Muslims who followed could not erase Egypt's memory. They built churches within temple walls and carved Coptic icons beside hieroglyphs, a palimpsest of cultures. So as night deepens and you drift toward dawn, remember this. Empires may fracture, dynasties may collapse, but the impulse to carve our names into stone, to insist on meaning beyond mortality, is eternal. The pharaoh's scars remain etched in sandstone and papyrus, whispers of ambition, devotion, and the unending dance between power and impermanence. Next time, in our final part 7, we'll trace these echoes into the Roman and Byzantine eras. Explore the rediscovery of Egypt by Napoleon's scholars and follow the modern rediscovery of Tutankhamun and his golden mask. Until then, rest easy and let the silent stones of history guide your dreams. Imagine crossing a windswept Mediterranean shore as the waves whisper secrets of empires long vanished. Above you, the towering silhouette of Pharaoh's lighthouse once guided mariners into Alexandria's harbor, a beacon commissioned by Ptolemy II that blended Egyptian architecture with Greek engineering. This fusion of cultures began under Alexander's successors, and it set the stage for centuries in which Egypt's ancient monuments would be alternately revered, repurposed, and forgotten. After Cleopatra's fall in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of Rome. Roman emperors styled themselves as pharaohs in formal inscriptions, yet most saw Egypt as a treasure chest, grain for Rome's food supply, papyrus for its archives, jeweled artifacts for its elites. Christianization swept in by the 4th century CE, and temples were closed or converted into churches. Egypt's great religious centers, Karnak, Dendera, Edfu, fell silent, except for the chants of a new faith. In Upper Egypt, Coptic Christians carved crosses onto temple walls, layering their hymns over hieroglyphs that had been sacred for millennia. Byzantine rule gave way to the Arab conquest in the 7th century CE. Arabic became the language of administration, and Islam reshaped Egypt's cultural landscape. Many temple stones were harvested for building new mosques and fortresses. Centuries of silt and sand buried once grand avenues, and pharaonic statues lay half-submerged in desert dunes. For nearly 400 years, much of Europe had only mythic notions of Egypt's glories. Then, in 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte landed on the coast with a scientific commission of scholars, engineers, and artists. As soldiers camped along the Nile, these savants sketched temple reliefs, collected papyri, and recorded local folklore. In 1799, a French officer discovered a black basalt slab near the port of Rosetta, inscribed in 3 scripts, Greek Demotic, and hieroglyphs. That Rosetta Stone proved pivotal. Because scholars could read ancient Greek, they unlocked the keys to Demotic script, then systematically deciphered hieroglyphs. In 1822, French linguist Jean-François Champollion announced he had finally cracked the phonetic alphabet of the Egyptian priests. Suddenly, dusty tomb walls spoke again, revealing prayers, recipes for spells, and the personal names of previously anonymous artisans. Meanwhile, adventurers such as Giovanni Belzoni, an Italian strongman turned archaeologist, pried open sealed chambers in the Valley of the Kings. In 1817, he cleared the entrance to Seti Way's tomb, unveiling labyrinthine corridors of colored reliefs. Although early excavators often carried treasures off to European museums, their exploits ignited a global fascination with pharaonic Egypt. By the late 19th century, Egyptology had become a formal discipline. Ludwig Borchardt surveyed the Step Pyramid at Saqqara in 1902. Howard Carter cataloged temple inscriptions at Luxor. In 1922, Carter made the discovery, for which we still pause in awe, Tomb KV62, the burial chamber of Tutankhamun, untouched by ancient robbers. Imagine that moment. A small antechamber, its walls lined with painted shrines, then a sealed doorway inscribed, "Firm of Eternity, belongs to the Osiris, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the two lands, Nebkepperur, the son of Tutankhamun." Carter's careful removal of the lid revealed the resplendent golden sarcophagus within nested coffins of solid gold and a treasure trove of over 5,000 objects. Alabaster chariots, inlaid furniture, jewel-studded fans, and the iconic death mask that has become Egypt's emblem. Tutmania swept the world. Newspapers marveled at the boy king's regalia. Exhibitions toured London and New York. Artists painted his likeness in Art Deco stylings. Yet behind the treasure-hunting glamour lay a revolution in methodology, meticulous recording of context photography of every object in situ, and nascent chemical analyses of pigments and textiles. In the decades since technology has unveiled ever more layers, CT scans of mummies, first performed in the 1970s and refined in the 2000s, revealed fractures in Tutankhamun's foot, signs of malaria in Ramses III, and a possible dagger wound in Horemheb. DNA sequencing has mapped royal lineages across dozens of mummies, confirming the incestuous unions of the 18th dynasty and identifying familial relationships once lost to time. Stable isotope analysis of teeth and bones traces the movement of traders and officials, cedar wood from Lebanon, in burial boats, gold from Nubia, in funerary masks, and diet changes corresponding to political upheavals. Meanwhile, international treaties and UNESCO campaigns have sought to preserve Egypt's monuments. In the 1960s, the construction of the Aswan High Dam threatened Abu Simbel and Philae Temple. Engineers undertook a colossal relocation project, lifting entire temples block by block and reassembling them on higher ground. Today, those temples stand as triumphs of modern archaeology and a testament to transnational cooperation. In the 21st century, digital mapping and 3D modeling allow us to peer inside sealed tombs without touching a single stone. LiDAR scans reveal hidden chambers behind rock-cut walls. Ground-penetrating radar detects voids under the sands. Virtual reality tours let anyone explore the Great Pyramid's internal passages or wander the hypostyle hall at Karnak, all from a web browser. Tourism has its own impact. Millions flock to Cairo's Egyptian Museum, now being replaced by the Grand Egyptian Museum near Giza, and to Luxor's Valley of the Kings. Their footsteps accelerate erosion. Their cameras record fleeting shadows on painted reliefs. Conservation efforts must balance access with preservation, ensuring that future generations can still hear the whisper of ancient hymns carved into temple walls. And yet, for all our scientific advances, Egypt still holds mysteries. Is the so-called KV63 chamber near Tut's tomb a cache of royal mummies, or merely a private storage pit? Have we truly found all of Nefertiti's tomb? Were there undocumented female pharaohs yet to be uncovered? Each new discovery invites fresh questions, reminding us that the sands still keep their secrets. As you drift toward sleep, picture the Rosetta Stone's grooves, the papyrus scrolls yellowed with age, and the glitter of Tutankhamun's mask under electric museum lights. Think of Champollion's triumphant decipherment, Belzoni's daring tomb entries. Carter's hushed, "Can you see anything?" And the modern scientists clad in lab coats gently brushing away dust under LED lamps. The pharaohs sought eternity in stone and spell. We seek to understand them through pixels and probes. Their golden afterlives were measured in cubits and ceremonies hours in the depth of our curiosity and the rigor of our scholarship. They left us pyramids that still confound engineering. We leave them, so long as we keep asking questions, the promise of new revelations. Next time, in Part 8, we'll journey into the role of Egypt in world culture, from Renaissance fascination and Freemasonry to Hollywood's cinematic spectacles, and explore how the image of the pharaoh continues to shape art politics and our collective imagination today. Until then, sleep well, and let the ghosts of the past guide your dreams. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine gilded obelisks thrusting from Renaissance piazzas, ivory-tusked elephants at the gates of Victorian fairs, and 16mm film reels flickering in darkened cinemas, each a testament to how the pharaohs have haunted our collective imagination long after their kingdoms fell silent. From the scholars of the Enlightenment to Hollywood's Technicolor epics, Egypt has been a mirror in which generations have seen their own hopes, fears, and fantasies reflected back in sandstone and spell. Renaissance Reveries. Our first stop is 16th century Rome, where popes and princes, enthralled by Pliny's descriptions and newly discovered papyri, began transplanting Egyptian artifacts into European life. Pope Sixtus V, 1585 to 1590 CE, famously re-erected ancient obelisks in St. Peter's Square and Piazza del Popolo, symbolically aligning the church with Egypt's ancient priest-kings. Mannerist painters, such as Giorgio Vasari, depicted pharaohs and hieroglyphs in grand fresco cycles, even though their interpretations often mixed fact with fanciful invention. In Florence and Paris, cabinet makers carved Egyptian motifs, winged sun discs, lotus columns into walnut, and ebony chests, coining an aesthetic for aristocratic Egyptian curiosities. Renaissance polymaths, like Athanasius Kircher, collected sundry fragments of hieroglyphic inscriptions, publishing them in lavishly illustrated tomes that, although wildly inaccurate, fueled European fascination with the Nile's lost civilization. Enlightenment Egyptomania. By the 18th century, Egyptomania swept through salons and coffee houses. Voltaire and Diderot debated the plausibility of pyramids built by slaves. Lawrence Stern spoofed antiquarians in Tristram Shandy. Freemasonry adopted Egyptian symbols, triangles, pyramids, the all-seeing eye, into its ceremonies, asserting a mystical lineage from the pharaoh's secret knowledge. Lodges christened their meeting halls Temple of Isis or Temple of Osiris, draping ritual robes in linen white and gold. Archaeological expeditions, sponsored by enlightened rulers, most famously Napoleon's 1798 journey, brought back tens of thousands of antiquities and the Rosetta Stone, which unlocked the language of temples. By century's end, public exhibitions in Paris and London displayed obelisks, sarcophagi, and painted cartonnage, inspiring a new wave of decorative arts. Wedgwood produced Egyptian black ceramics. Thomas Hope designed Egyptian revival interiors with sphinxes guarding mahogany doorways, Victorian spectacles, and the great exhibitions. In mid-19th century London, the great international exhibitions transformed Egyptian antiquities into mass spectacles. Life-size statues of Ramesses the and colossal sphinxes graced crystal palaces. Mummies were unwrapped before gaslit crowds, their linen layers peeled back under medical-style lamps. These unwrappings, part science demonstration, part freak show, revealed both ancient mortuary art and Victorian anxieties about death and the exotic other. Queen Victoria herself sponsored a Gothic Egyptian pavilion at Balmoral, complete with lotus leaf capitals and Pharaoh Amenhotep's funerary couch. The British Museum's Egyptian Court, opened in 1857, invited visitors to wander among massive columns salvaged from Karnak amid flickering gas lamps and placards extolling the pharaoh's grandeur. 20th century Hollywood. From universal horror to epic romance. With the advent of cinema, pharaonic Egypt became a ready canvas for both horror and romance. In 1932, Universal Pictures released The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff as the resurrected priest Imhotep, an undead aristocrat whose mummy's bandages became an iconic horror trope. The film combined desert settings, dark chemical chambers, and forbidden love, cementing The Mummy as a staple of Western pop culture. Later decades saw Technicolor extravaganzas. 1959's The Mummy remake, Hammer Film's Gothic take in the 1950s-70s. And of course, the 1963 blockbuster Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor draped in emeralds and awing crowds in Caesar's Rome. These films played fast and loose with history spies in palanquins, secret doorways behind temple walls. But they reshaped global perceptions of Egypt as a place of glamour, danger, and ancient magic. Disney introduced younger generations to Egypt in animated form. The Prince of Egypt, 1998. A retelling of Moses brought pastel-hued temples and choral scores to family audiences, while later video games like Assassin's Creed Origins, 2017, invited players to explore vast virtual recreations of Alexandria and Giza, from postcards to Instagram. Tourism and the digital revival. In the 20th and 21st centuries, mass tourism transformed Egypt from archaeological wonderland to one of the world's most visited destinations. By 1979, over 2 million tourists a year flocked to Cairo, Luxor, and Aswan, snapping Polaroids at the Sphinx's paws. Cruise ships docked en masse, and Nile riverboats carried guests past unbroken fields of papyrus. Today, Instagram influencers pose in the Valley of the Kings. Hashtags like #HackBucketList and Egyptian Sunset accumulate millions of posts, and virtual reality headsets recreate pharaonic processions in museums from New York to Tokyo. Augmented reality apps let you aim your phone at Karnak's walls to see color reconstructions of hieroglyphs once bright with pigment. Drones survey unexcavated sites, and 3D printed models of Tutankhamun's mask allow tactile experiences without risking the original. Art, fashion, and political symbolism. Even high art has drawn from the well of Egyptian imagery. In the 20th century, surrealists like Salvador Dali painted melting pyramids. Pop artists like Andy Warhol screen-printed Cleopatra's visage in neon. Fashion designers from Elsa Schiaparelli's Tutti Frutti collections to Jean-Paul Gaultier's 1990s catwalks borrowed pharaonic collars, Nimis headdresses, and ankh motifs to evoke power and mystique. Politically pharaonic iconography has appeared on everything from national flags. The Egyptian coat of arms features the Eagle of Salad in itself, a modern reinterpretation of ancient royal heraldry, to protest art. During the 2011 Arab Spring, graffiti artists scrawled stylized pharaohs alongside demands for justice, drawing parallels between ancient despotism and modern authoritarianism. The enduring allure. Why do we remain enthralled by the pharaohs? Perhaps because they embody our deepest yearnings to wield power, to defy death, and to leave a legacy carved in stone. Their world was one of cosmic certainty rituals that ensured the rising sun and the Nile flood, but also of breathtaking creativity and technological prowess. In our own time of rapid change and digital uncertainty, the pharaohs stand as both warning and inspiration. They remind us that even the loftiest empires can crumble, yet also that human ambition and artistry can achieve wonders that outlast dynasties. As you drift toward slumber, picture the pharaoh's lighthouse's tapering silhouette fading into dusk, the shadows of obelisks lengthening across Venetian squares, the golden mask of Tutankhamun glinting under museum lights. Listen for the echo of sand-swept winds, the distant chant of a priestess offering libations to Ra. And know that even if we cannot speak their language, we remain forever in dialogue with history. Next time, in our final part 9, we'll explore the modern archaeological frontier, the ethics of excavation, community archaeology clandestine finds, and the ongoing quest to balance preservation with discovery. Until then, may your dreams be as rich as Nidoru honey, and and as enduring as limestone monuments under a desert sun. Close your eyes and imagine a desert dawn, soft light bathing temple, ruins the air, still cool, and the whisper of trowels brushing away millennia of sand. Modern Egyptology is as much about preservation and ethics as it is about uncovering secret chambers and priceless artifacts. Tonight in Part 9, we'll explore how archaeologists balance the thrill of discovery with the responsibility of stewardship, and how local communities, international law, and new technologies shape this evolving frontier. From treasure hunts to team science. Not so long ago, early explorers treated tombs like treasure chests, entering with picks, dynamite, or sheer brute force. Today's archaeological teams operate more like hospitals, delicate, collaborative, and patient. Multidisciplinary crews include conservators, bioarchaeologists, geoarchaeologists, and even forensic scientists working alongside local Egyptians to map sites with centimeter precision, record every shard of pottery, and photograph wall paintings before they fade. Community archaeology and cultural heritage. Increasingly, projects invite nearby villagers and Bedouin tribes into the process. In Luxor, for example, community workshops train residents to monitor environmental threats, rising groundwater pollution, and urban sprawl that can damage tombs. Schools host archaeology days where children learn to wash pottery sherds and reconstruct vessels, connecting younger generations with ancestral legacy. This shared ownership helps protect sites from looting and vandalism. Legal frameworks and the fight against illicit trade. International conventions like the 1970 UNESCO Treaty Bar. The export of unprovenanced antiquities aiming to choke the black market that fuels tomb robberies. Auction houses now vet Egyptian provenance more rigorously, and border patrols cooperate across nations to intercept smuggled papyri and sculpture fragments. High-profile repatriations, such as Italy's return of a gilded coffin in 2015, underscore the shifting balance cultural heritage belongs first to its people of origin. Cutting-edge technology in the field. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR surveys reveal buried chambers without a single shovel strike. Drone photogrammetry creates 3D models of entire temple complexes in days, enabling virtual visits and damage assessments after floods or earthquakes. Portable X-ray fluorescence (PXRF) analyzers instantly determine pigment composition on wall paintings, guiding conservators in selecting compatible restoration materials. Even DNA and isotope analysis of human remains tell stories of migration diet and family ties that no written record preserves. Balancing tourism and conservation, Egypt relies on tourism for revenue, yet millions of annual visitors can accelerate decay. Humidity inside tombs encourages microbial growth, while flashlight glare fades pigments. To mitigate this, authorities limit group sizes in vulnerable tombs, install climate-controlled corridors, and build replica burial chambers, such as the tomb of Thutmose III in Luxor, to divert traffic away from original sites. Virtual reality kiosks offer immersive alternatives for those who cannot explore fragile interiors. The ongoing quest. And still, the desert yields surprises. In 2018, workers repairing a sewer line in Saqqara uncovered a cache of 30 sealed wooden coffins untouched for 2 to 500 years, Saqqara's secret cemetery. In 2021, a buried ship near Giza provided clues about ancient Nile logistics. Every find raises new questions. Who were these people? What did they believe? How did they live? Each discovery is a reminder that Egypt's past is not a closed book, but a living dialogue between relics and researchers. As you drift toward sleep, picture laser-scanned hieroglyphs, 3D printers, reconstructing broken Ushabti, and community guardians patrolling night-lit ruins. The Pharaohs' stone legacies endure, but so does our responsibility to listen, learn, and protect. Tomorrow, in Part 10, we'll reflect on what the Pharaohs mean for us today, how their quests for power, immortality, and memory resonate in our modern world, and what lessons we carry forward as keepers of their timeless stories. Until then, seek to rest easy, and may your dreams be as enduring as Egypt's silent stones. Let's pause for a moment and let it sink in. Thousands of years have passed since the pharaohs walked the gilded halls of Karnak or watched the Nile's floodwaters rise. Yet their lives and choices still echo in our own time, reminders of power's lure, of the human craving to outlive our bodies, and of the legacies we forge for better or worse. In this final chapter, we'll explore how the pharaohs' quests for power, immortality, and memory resonate in our modern world, and what lessons we can carry forward as stewards of their enduring stories. The allure of absolute power. The pharaohs ruled as living gods, wielding unchecked authority over armies, resources, and lives. Today, we see similar dynamics in leaders who centralize power, bypass checks and balances, or elevate themselves above the rule of law. Ramesses II's grand self-promotion at Abu Simbel mirrors modern leader cults, where monuments, statues, and media glorify a single individual. We can learn from the pharaoh's ultimate vulnerability. No matter how towering their monuments, even Ramesses' empire waned and his tombs were looted. Absolute power may feel eternal, but it is always subject to history's shifting sands. Obsession with immortality. Pharaohs poured boundless resources into their tombs, retainer sacrifices, Shabti armies, endless rituals to secure an eternal afterlife. In our era, we channel that same impulse into digital footprints, social media legacies, and digital cloud archives designed to survive us. We chase virtual immortality. Archived tweets, online profiles, even DNA storage in glass capsules. But just as tombs were plundered and hieroglyphs faded, our digital records can vanish in data breaches, platform shutdowns, or forgotten drives. The pharaohs remind us that true immortality may lie less in artifacts and more in the relationships, values, and knowledge we pass on. Architects of narrative. From Akhenaten's Amarna hymns to the poem of Pentor at Kadesh, pharaohs understood the power of narrative to shape collective memory. Today, political leaders, corporations, and influencers craft their own stories, press releases, documentaries, sponsored content to influence perceptions. The lesson: question the official version. Seek multiple sources. Recognize that every narrative is selective, emphasizing some facts and omitting others. In the same way we read between the lines of hieroglyphic reliefs, we can analyze modern messaging with a critical eye. Innovation and hubris. Pharaohs pioneered technologies, stone quarrying monumental ramps, solar aligning tombs, yet these feats sometimes bred hubris. The Great Pyramids, almost superhuman construction, led later rulers to overextend, straining Egypt's economy and manpower. In our time, we celebrate breakthroughs: space travel, artificial intelligence, gene editing, while confronting unintended consequences: climate change, data privacy, crises, ethical dilemmas. The Pharaoh's story reminds us to temper ambition with foresight and to consider long-term impacts before erecting our own monuments, whether physical or technological. Cultural borrowing and identity. Egyptian motifs have been borrowed, repurposed, and reimagined from Renaissance obelisks to Hollywood mummies. This cross-cultural exchange fueled creativity, but also sparked appropriation and misunderstanding. Today, global connectivity accelerates cultural borrowing on a massive scale. We can honor the pharaohs by studying contexts, credits, and original meanings, avoiding superficial stereotypes, and engaging respectfully with living cultures that share Egyptian heritage. Preservation versus access. The tug of war between preserving fragile tombs and sharing them with millions of visitors finds a modern parallel in debates over digital openness versus data integrity. Museums wrestle with balancing exhibit access against the risk of damage. Archivists decide what to digitize and what to keep behind limited access doors. The pharaohs teach us the value of stewardship, protecting what we inherit, while making it possible for future generations to learn, marvel, and draw inspiration. Community and collaboration. Early Egyptology often sidelined local voices, treating sites as foreign treasure troves. Today's community archaeology models engage local residents as partners: farmers turned site custodians, Bedouin guides, mapping uncharted tombs. In our own projects, whether corporate teams, academic research, or neighborhood initiatives, we can emulate that spirit of inclusion, recognizing that those closest to a resource often hold the deepest knowledge and the strongest interest in its well-being. Ethics of discovery. The pharaoh's tombs yielded treasures that now fill museums worldwide, yet debates rage over rightful ownership, repatriation, and the ethics of excavation. We must ask who benefits when we unearth the past. Our local communities and the descendants of those ancient peoples sharing in the gains. Modern institutions can follow Egypt's recent repatriations as exemplars, returning artifacts when clear provenance demands it, and forging partnerships for shared curation and interpretation. Human stories behind the kings. Amid the grandeur, the pharaohs were mortal children who couldn't ride chariots, sick kings propped on canes, queens who loved and lost. Modern biographies of political leaders, CEOs, and celebrities often strip away nuance, reducing them to slogans or scandals. The Egyptian records remind us to seek the full human portrait, with flaws, vulnerabilities, and moments of tenderness. In our own lives, we can practice empathy, acknowledging that public figures and neighbors alike carry complex histories shaped by forces beyond their control. Our place in history. Finally, the pharaohs teach us humility. We stand on their shoulders. Our math, our astronomy, our calendar systems find roots in their innovations. Yet we also carry forward their failures: resource overuse, social inequities, obsession with status symbols. In crafting our legacy, be it through art, science, governance, or family life, we can choose purpose over pomp, community over conquest, sustainability over spectacle. As you drift toward sleep, picture the silent sands of Giza Golden at sunset, cool under starlight, listening to secrets half whispered by the Sphinx's limestone lips. Remember Tutankhamun's fragile youth, Hatshepsut's audacious reign, Akhenaten's radiant revolution, and Ramesses' colossal triumphs. In their rise and fall, you'll find echoes of your own life's ambitions and anxieties. The pharaohs built pyramids and temples to defy oblivion. We build memories, digital footprints, and stories in hopes of leaving our mark. Their world ended in the dust of conquest and neglect. Ours may end in shifting values and unseen consequences. Yet by studying their lives, the brilliance and the bloodshed, the faith and the folly, we learn not only about ancient Egypt, but also about the enduring human condition, our longing for stability, significance, and something that outlasts the final curtain. So as dawn breaks across your dreams, may you carry with you the timeless lesson of the pharaohs that true legacy rests not in the height of our monuments, but in the depth of our wisdom, compassion, and the positive change we inspire in the lives of others. Rest well, and let the legacy of the gods of Egypt guide you toward your own best self today and for all the tomorrows to come.